Thanks for inviting me. It's a pleasure to talk to such an international and diverse audience, trying to explain the green phenomenon. And maybe you are aware that Germany is the very center, I would say, the stronghold of the international green movement in political terms, in terms of party politics, but I don't want to talk too much about party politics this morning. Just to give you an idea of the role of the German Greens, meanwhile, are playing in domestic politics 30 years after their founding period, the end of the 70s and early 80s. It was quite almost a miracle, you know. The Greens started from the very fringes of German society. And the completely new political movement based on the very strong environmental movement in the 70s, women's lib groups, citizens' participation was a strong part of this ensemble, which initially came together to build the Green Party. Of course, the anti-arms race movement, the peace movement, which was very strong also in the 70s and early 80s, with hundreds of thousands of people rallying on the streets. So it was a social movement which finally converged into and converted itself into a political party. And in 1983, for the first time, the Greens managed to enter the national parliament. Meanwhile, it has become, I would say, without doubt, the third party in Germany, the third strongest party. In the national polls, it's about 15%, and the tendency is going up. And for the first time, we have a Green prime minister in the state of Baden-Württemberg, which is one of the major industrial states in Germany. The Greens ended up in the last state elections with 24% of the votes and managed to build a coalition with the Social Democrats. Now we have the political leader of the state is a long-term Green activist. And so to tell you this story, and just to give you an impression that meanwhile the Greens, I would say, have entered the very center of German society and German politics. And to a certain extent, green thinking and green politics almost have become mainstream. This is especially the case in terms of energy policy. Maybe you are familiar, at least roughly, with the German energy transition, phasing out nuclear energy and stepwise also diminishing coal as a source of electrical power, replacing it by renewable energies. We have a very fast acceleration of growing up of solar and wind energy in Germany. Meanwhile, around about 25% of the overall electrical consumption comes from renewable energies. And at the same time, some progress, especially in the German industry, in terms of energy efficiency. Just to give you an example, the chemical industry in Germany, which is one of the main industries, increased its economic output since 1990 by almost 50%, And at the same time, the chemical industry reduced its energy consumption by 30%. Though this is a real decoupling of economic growth and natural consumption, in this case, energy consumption. And this has more or less become a driving force for the German economy. So the old antagonism, the old contradiction between ecology and the economy, meanwhile, more and more is being bridged, and there's a new idea of a green economy as the future for German industry and the German economy at large. And if you're looking to the astonishing success of the German industries on the global markets, it has a market share on the global exports of around about 7%, but in terms of green technologies, of environmental technologies, the market share of the German industry globally is about 15%. So going green has become a success story, has become an economic success story. And this is the explanation why it is possible that in one of the major industrial states of Germany, Baden-Württemberg, now the Greens are playing a leading role. But of course, this is not just a national phenomenon, not in terms of party politics, concerning green parties. It's still more or less a European phenomenon with some, let's say, relevant green parties in other places around the world, but still, with respect to party politics, it's a marginal phenomenon, but it's much more important that I would say green thinking has become a global phenomenon. And what is green thinking about? It's not only about the environmental movement, but of course environmental issues are at the very core of the green movement. This is why it is called green movement, of course, referring to nature. And this is about very, I would say, basic challenges for our century, for the decades to come. And when I was invited, I briefly wondered why I should talk about climate change and green politics in a conference about dealing with human rights. But you could look at these kind of issues, basic environmental issues, also as a matter of human rights concerning, for instance, the access to clean water, concerning food security, and of course concerning climate change, which will endanger the livelihood of billions of people around the globe, and especially of poor people. Concerning phenomena like desertification, the loss of fertile soil, which is a very, very critical development in a growing world population growing from now 7 billion to 9 billion to the midst of the century, growing need for food, also growing need for sweet water, for drinkable, clean water. And at the same time, we have the rise of billions of people looking at the next 20 to 30 years from poverty and from very poor living conditions to a more or less middle-class lifestyle all around the world, which is a major driver for economic growth, especially in the emerging economies. The rise of every year around 80 to 100 million people to middle-class lifestyle. And this is connected with urbanization. Now, for the first time in human history, round about half of the world population is living in cities. And this development will go on and will go up very fast over the next decades. There are predictions by the United States and other urbanists that in the midst of our century, 2050, about 70 to 80% of then 9 billion people will live in cities. And this, of course, includes an enormous amount of construction, which will happen over the next decades. In China, every month, a new 1 million city is emerging. And already existing cities are exploding. So dealing with issues of sustainability in terms of greening the cities has become vital, has become really crucial for the human future, concerning the way the energy needs of these people are covered. Will it come from nuclear energy or from coal? With all the risks connected with nuclear energy and all the risks connected with coal, CO2 emissions, creating the greenhouse gas effect, or will it come from renewable energies, decentralized cities which are producing more energy than they are consuming, buildings which produce energy with solar panels integrated in the walls and at the rooftops and small wind turbines, very energy efficient. So this kind of innovation, which at the same time is creating new jobs for a growing urban young population. If you're talking about traffic and mobility, will these cities be built on car mobility? Already today, I would say car traffic in a lot of cities all around the world has come to its limits, producing pollution of air and more and more stuck in traffic jams. So it's not about mobility, it's more about immobility by car. Or will it be based on modern, attractive public transport and city which is friendly to bicyclists and people who are walking short distances, all these kinds of issues. So it's not only about traditional conservation of nature. Of course, this is an important issue too, preserving the last, say, big natural resources, rainforests and other places, very important for biological diversity. But it's more about reconstructing, reinventing the way we are producing and consuming. Reconstructing our economy and reinventing our lifestyles. This is at the very core of green politics, and I'm very convinced that this is one of the main challenges for global politics for the next decades to come, given this enormous pace and the enormous amount of economic growth we will see for the next 20 to 30 years. Predictions are about doubling the world economic product within the next 20 to 25 years. So until maybe 2035, we will have the double amount of goods and services produced globally. And if we do that with the current patterns, with this enormous consumption of resources and the enormous amount of emissions and pollution, this will destabilize the major global environmental system. Climate, water, biodiversity, and fertile soils. So we have to change our economy, our patterns of production and consumption, decoupling growth from environmental consumption, striving to a high degree of resource efficiency, creating more wealth from less resources. And this will offer new opportunities, new economic opportunities, especially for the developing countries and the emerging countries, so we can link environmental and social issues and try to create a kind of win-win mechanism between environmental and social trade-offs. So I'm not at all pessimistic. I'm worried about the future in medium terms. I'm worried because there are enormous challenges, but I'm not pessimistic. I still believe that we can rely on human creativity, on entrepreneurship, but we need prudent politics. And there's a lag, say, between technical and social developments going on already, and politics, which is very much behind the needs, maybe concerning, or for example, concerning international climate diplomacy. You all may be aware of the failure of the last global climate conference in Copenhagen to reach a deal between the environmental and the industrial countries. And I'm convinced the deeper root cause for that is that still climate protection was dealt as a kind of burden sharing. And this is the old way to think about it, that climate protection, reducing emissions, is about diminishing opportunities for economic growth and prosperity. And I'm convinced it's just the other way around. If we are determined enough to go green in terms of our energy production and the way of industrial production, this will diminish the cost of industrialization, and it will diminish the cost of economic growth, and at the same time will create a new wave of innovation and investment and jobs. So I would say beyond party politics, I'm quite confident that green thinking will be one of the major forces internationally in the years to come, and will create kind of optimistic optimistic view on our future. Thank you.